Welcome to Sales for Nerds. I'm your host and chief nerd, Ruben Swartz. If you started a business because you love serving clients but realized you didn't like the sales and marketing aspect of running that business so much, this is the podcast for you. Sales and marketing doesn't have to suck. It can actually be a lot of fun. And on this show, we're going to teach you how to connect instead of network, teach instead of market, help instead of sell, so you can keep serving people even while you're building your pipeline and growing your business. Now let's get to it. Today, I'm super excited to have with me Corrie Loguidice, who helps people recognize and capitalize on their talents, no matter their circumstances. She's a business strategist, a high-performance coach, and a professional keynote speaker. She's been featured in major media outlets, including TEDx, Girl Boss, Business Insider, Thrive Global, and so on. She's a fourth-generation entrepreneur, but she's going to share some tips with us. So even if you're a first-generation starting out entrepreneur, you can capitalize on that. And she went through some really tough times, just a rough patch of really 5 years, including miscarriage, abuse, divorce, suicide of a close friend, and made the difficult decision to step down from the family business and go out on her own. And one of the things she helps people with is going out and finding clients for yourself without necessarily feeling like you're a salesperson. How do you do that authentically and naturally, but also effectively? So when I heard that, I really wanted to have her come and share her wisdom with you. Corrie, thanks for joining us on Sales for Nerds. What do you have in your glass?
Ruben, thank you for having me. I actually have vodka with a little bit of water and watermelon juice.
Okay. And
Yeah,
is there a name for this, or is this just like
no, it
Corrie's
was what
cocktail?
I had in the fridge. It's funny because my son accidentally dropped a watermelon this week. So we couldn't cut it up, because it was all like jaggedy and looked like an iceberg. So I was like, okay, let's put it in the blender and make juice out of it. So when I knew I'm coming on the podcast, I had to have some kind of libation. I was like, okay, let's play bartender.
I love it. This is the spirit of innovation that this podcast
Exactly.
is all about. Now I feel totally lame with my delicious Cantina di Montalcino, Brunello di Montalcino, Sangiovese. I was lucky enough to get to go to Italy finally after COVID postponed the trip for a couple of years. And I have been drinking a lot of Sangiovese because it's really delicious. So anyway, cheers, welcome.
Cheers.
And maybe tell me a little bit about your background and what your family business involved before you even started out on your own.
Sure. So a little bit of background, and then I'll tell you about the family business because it kind of ties into it. So in short, I have a very expensive piece of paper that says I could draw well. So I have an art degree, which meant that following college, I was waiting tables like a lot of artists. And this really kind of annoyed my father, who was he was the second generation running that business. So he was like, Corrie, why don't you, instead of waiting tables, why don't you come work for the family business? You could be a graphic designer or something to kind of start. So I figured, okay, cool. I'm down with that. So I started off as a graphic designer, learned marketing on the fly, because I had no experience with it. And to be honest, my family's business at the time didn't even really have a marketing department. So in, some background on what my family's business does and still does to this day, they're a wholesale electronics distributor. So in short, the way that they make their money is they're the middleman between big Fortune 200 brands and small mom and pop resellers on Main Street here in the States. So my family's business was responsible for the entire Northeastern United States. So Virginia up through Maine, so a very large territory. And my specific task, from when I started to when I ended, working in day-to-day ops there, was to basically get the word out on the small local retailers, because the more that they sold, the more money my family's business made.
Right.
But that led us to an interesting conundrum, because here it's basically David going up against Goliath. Nowadays with the internet, it was very different when my family's business had first started, pre-internet. Manufacturers have a way to get to the public direct, right? So it kind of eliminated the need for a lot of wholesalers. So with that said, what made us valuable was being able to provide business development services for mom and pop. So basically I had to get really creative, and that's where my background in fine arts really came in handy, and the fact that I didn't have a business background, I didn't know how stuff was done. So I was like, okay, here's a problem. Let's figure out a creative way to solve it. So I had to figure out ways for the general public to learn about the small mom and pop retailers instead of calling the 800 number. So very, very early on, I was an early adopter of digital. media, social media. I mean, I think I had my Twitter account back in like 2003. We were using it for lead generation at that point, content marketing, copywriting, all that stuff. Because it was no cost, at the time it was, no barrier to entry.
Right.
And it did help, our small local retailers. So with that said, I absolutely loved the work I was doing, getting to be that creative, get to help small, mom and pop stand out, be able to support my family business. I love the people that I worked with. I liked overall what we were doing, but something kind of felt like it was missing. I couldn't quite pinpoint it, but something felt off. And so I kind of ignored it and kept doing what I was doing for multiple years until I hit like you had said, that 5-year span. That was really bad. So it started off with a miscarriage, which then had me realizing I was in an abusive marriage. I ended up becoming a single mother. So I divorced when my son was only 5 months old, and I was managing all of this while still operating. I was at that point running the whole operation for my family as SVP. So sales, operation, marketing was all coming to me at that point. And I was also trying to juggle my very trepidatious personal life, in addition to juggling everybody else's problems at work. And this was compounded by the fact that as a single mom and having to move away from where I lived and everything else to be closer to support with my family and whatnot, I had a 20-hour commute a week. It was crazy. So I was commuting 2 hours each way every day, Monday through Friday. So I remember having this realization, when I was adding up the hours that I was paying my au pair to watch my son just while I commuted. Right. I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm paying somebody a part-time salary so I can go to my full-time job. I'm like, this is absolutely, asinine. But that still wasn't enough motivation for me to make the change because I was comfortable. In short, I had everything that I thought I always wanted. I had the house with the white picket fence. I had my kid. I always wanted to have a family. I was, an entrepreneur, business owner, in some capacity, working for my family's business. So in my mind, I kind of had all the boxes checked off. So I couldn't quite reconcile why I wasn't happy. And
just because you were working like crazy and commuting 20 hours a week and just gotten out of an abusive relationship with a 5-month and you have a 5-month-old at home. I mean, why would not everything be peachy?
Right. Which is totally illogical, but I'm sure a lot of folks out there who are type A, like I am, when you're a perfectionist and you're always a high achiever, that's always been me. So you kind of don't give yourself that grace to kind of get through that. So for me, I'm kind of like, I don't understand. I'm confused why, like, I have everything on paper, but I don't feel like I have everything. And it took me losing what I thought was my future. So I had a post-divorce partner. It got very serious. I was with him over a year at that point, and I lost him to suicide, and I was the one to find him. And it was at that moment that I remember standing on the lawn, waiting for the detectives to arrive to clear me as a suspect, which most people don't know. Like, if you're the one to find them, it's like, guess what? They're going to look into you, which adds more trauma onto trauma.
Right.
But I remember sitting there, and it was really a pivotal moment for me because I remember thinking to myself, number one, Corrie, you will get through this because you've been through this before, right? This is like the, fourth thing out of all the crap that life has been giving you. So you got through that. This is another fresh start. And number two, everything you knew as of this morning no longer exists. Like, what are you doing with your life? Who are you living your life for? So it was at that time that I had decided, what, really not fulfilled in my work. So I made the difficult decision to step down from the family's business, which I will also add to, that was more difficult than anything else I had experienced in the 5 years, because there were so many, I guess you could say, expectations, and I was basically being groomed, for this role, and I was walking away from it. So that was very, very difficult. But in a very, very short period of time, just due to my background in the 15 years of what I spent in business development for small mom and pop with little to no resources, I had landed multiple paying clients in a matter of weeks. I knew how to get press. So I was in the media. I had grown a large social media following just due to being in social media since 2003. And within a year, I was on the TEDx stage. So now I, basically help other skilled professionals make similar transition. leaving corporate, being able to capitalize on their pre-existing talents, experience, value, teaching them how to market and sell themselves and have results as quickly as that, because there's nothing to invest in. Everything's very guerrilla style. And it allows you to build up your confidence as you build your business.
Great. I mean, that's such a tremendous story. And I have so many questions or things that I want to say. And we could probably just talk about that story for an hour and not even get to all the tips. But one thing I think is really cool about that is you took something that seemed like it had no bearing on the business world, your art degree, and you used it in a creative way that a business person, I'm guessing that if for some reason you'd had the business background and the art degree, you would have known, oh, I should never do this. It'll never work, or this is not what's done. And you just didn't know. If I'm reading between the lines, you didn't know anything else. So you're just like, let me just take what talents I have and apply them, which I think is super cool.
Exactly.
And then obviously a whole bunch of other stuff going on there. So let's dive into the details about how did you land those first clients? Did you do that before you decided to quit, or was it, I'm quitting, I'm done. Oh gosh, I got to get clients.
That's a phenomenal question. So I had started doing, I guess you could call it creative avoidance busy work on the business before I had left the family business. So I had built a website and stuff like that. And really, truth is, a website isn't going to get you leads. Conversations get you leads. So I had done all that, but I did end up, through my grief and everything else, I did decide to quit cold turkey, which it really, and I even tell my clients this too, you need to be in a position where you feel financially secure to be able to make that leap. For a lot of people, it's doing it while you work the day job. For others, it might be, if you have some other kind of source of income to float you in between. For example, I had a lot of clients that came on during the pandemic because of all the stimulus payments and stuff like that. They had what they needed to be able to invest the time into their business, but still have their bills paid. In my specific instance, I had been very financially savvy, post-divorce, and made sure that I had 6 months of emergency savings. So I decided, in some grief-stricken, crazy moment, that I was having an emergency of the soul and it had to end now. And I was going to cash in on my emergency savings, quit cold turkey, and go for it. Which in hindsight, I see now is very, very brave, considering I had a mortgage, I had a 5-month-old, I had an au pair, I had all this stuff I still had to pay for. But it was still at that time worth it for me to take the risk, because I knew that continuing to go the same route I was going, I wasn't going to get to where I knew deep down I was meant to be.
Okay. So, and I think that's a great point about the financial security and having the emergency fund, and maybe you keep your day job or whatever. But if for some reason you can't, I think one of the terrifying things is, okay, say you've been responsible, you've got that 6-month cushion, but you don't know how long it's going to take to get to the point that you can actually be back in the black in terms of your finances, right? So how did you handle that at the time?
Sure. So, the one thing that you have to know upfront if you're going to start a business is that conversations are what lead to revenue. So what I find a lot of brand new entrepreneurs, right. So what I find a lot of brand new entrepreneurs do is they're so fixated on the website and their logo and the hex color that their logo is going to be.
Very important stuff.
They're so worried about that they completely neglect to figure out, okay, what is it that you do? Who is it that you help through what it is you do, and why should they care?
Yep.
Right. And if you can't convey those 3 things to people in a conversation, you're never going to be able to convey it to them and have a website convert.
Yes.
Right. So having those things clear, which, working in my benefit, all the years of doing social media and low, no cost marketing, that worked in my favor, because I knew, and the way I did it, and this is something that I teach too, it's very much a hybrid strategy between content creation, social media, and networking, just old school, business card at a diner networking. But there's no content created, right? So it's learning how to interact and find the people that you can help online in the places that they hang out online, right? So it's not about any specific, platform. It's specific to who it is you're targeting, and you have to be clear on what you're offering to figure out who it is you're targeting, right? And once you are crystal clear on that, people talk about their problems all day long online. Or even in person, right? So for example, you want to be a personal trainer, go and hang out at a gym, you're going to see people who are, making progress towards wanting to lose weight, but they might be talking about the problems that they're having losing weight, which then makes it very easy for you to step in and interject. Hey, would you like some help troubleshooting a few things? Demonstrate that value. And then from there, it makes a very, very easy transition into a sales conversation. So that's how I did it personally. I didn't really realize that was an asset and a way of doing things that was different than a lot of other business coaches were teaching at the time, until I personally had a mentor that was like, you need to double down on this because no one's doing anything like this, especially for brand new businesses. And you have an opportunity to impact a lot of people with this specific strategy.
So basically, figure out who you want to help, figure out where these people are, and talk to them.
I wouldn't even say so much as who you want to help. I think it's based on, what you have to offer, who can best benefit from what it is that you have to give.
And this is something I see all the time. People say, I help small business owners, or I help entrepreneurs, or I help whatever. I help C-level and V-level and director level, blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of like, yes, I believe you that you can help all of these people, but you've been complaining about how you have all these no-shows or people who waste your time or they don't pay or whatever. Who are the people who actually are like, oh my gosh, thank goodness I found you. I can't wait to throw money at you so you can help me fix my problem.
Right. No, and your messaging is dialed in when when you have that initial connection with them, they're like, oh my God, where have you been all my life? I didn't know somebody like you existed.
Yes.
Right. Like that, your messaging is like on point once you get to that.
And a lot of that is you have to be really specific because they've already found all the generic people who have been wasting their time. And one of the things I say is not only is it great because you attract that ideal client, but you also repel all the other people who are not the right person for you. And they're not going to waste your time. And while that seems scary, especially at the beginning, when you really, really need to get some revenue in the door, it's like, what would you rather have? One more conversation with an ideal prospect, or 5 more conversations with people who, worst case scenario, they're going to turn into clients and they're going to be nightmares.
Right. That alignment is so important, especially when you're looking to build confidence too, as a new entrepreneur, because those people that are going to turn into difficult clients, that's going to end up making you doubt why you got into it to begin with and whether or not you're cut out for it. Whereas if you really kind of take your time to figure out who is the perfect person for you and make decisions based on your intuition and values and things that are important to you and the impact that you want to see on others, that shifts the dynamic and makes it that it's not necessarily even just a job, you're fulfilling a calling.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
that allows you to kind of, stick through the difficult times.
And I think people also understand that when they talk to you, they understand whether they're talking to someone who just started a web design agency because they heard it was a good way to make money, and someone who's really passionate about providing accessibility for blind people on websites or something like that, whatever the particular mission is that's bigger than yourself.
Right.
All right. Sorry. So we get a little distracted because I'm so into this message, and I feel like if people listen to this all the time, they know I beat this drum a bunch. If people who use my CRM know that there's a whole section in there about like, how do you get this messaging down so that you can have these conversations effectively? I think one of the things that people struggle with is like, yes, I get it. Everything you're saying, Corrie, is so right, but I don't know how to dial it in adequately because, I've got these 3 different clients that are in 3 different industries, and, one's a 50-year-old executive and one's a 23-year-old TikToker, and, they're all over the place, and they're really struggling to kind of pick. What advice do you offer to those folks?
Sure. So that's a super simple one for me. So it kind of comes back to what we were talking about before, and me realizing that being a fine artist was an asset in the business world. It's number one, identifying what makes you different, because that's what's going to help you stand out from all the other competition in your market. Right. And then the other thing too is understanding, okay, with what you offer that's different, what problems is it that you're solving for people within that niche that you are best equipped to solve? Right. So if you're picking between 3 different niches, guaranteed there's one of them based on your prior, whether it be life experience, your education, your certifications, your work experience, you're better suited to solve their problem because you have some kind of experience and expertise to bring to it. You always want to go the path of least resistance. because that's going to be the path that you are the most confident.
Just play devil's advocate for a second, something that I see sometimes is people say, okay, what I have tons of experience in is, let's just say, helping coaches build $2,000 websites, but it's kind of driving me crazy because it's not a lot of money and they're high maintenance. I really want to get into, I don't know what, I have some mid-sized businesses that spend 25 grand on their website, for example. Mm-hmm. And so they're sort of stuck between kind of what they're used to comfort wise and where they think they need to go. And I think that notion of go where you're confident and where you're going to knock it out of the park is great. But at the same time, you're sort of the perfect example of, well, at some point you decide you don't want to do that anymore. You want to go do something uncomfortable.
Yeah, no. So here, and I love this example too, because this is great to kind of like coach through, right? So in that example, I would ask the web designer, like, okay, well, what about the service that you're offering the coaches? What makes you dynamic that you enjoy doing as part of that service? Is it the fact that you're doing it in 24 hours? Is it the fact that you're delivering on a certain type of copy? Like, what is it that's made you in demand for that specific niche? Right. And then from there, once they're able to identify that, then they need to see, okay, well, based on, working with, mid-level businesses at a certain, revenue cap, what problems do they have, or which industry, again, kind of niching down further, which industry most likely needs that problem solved that I effectively deliver on?
So if it's, hey, I do this in 24 hours, you go out to very fast-paced businesses that are always launching new things or whatever.
Great example of this. So you have a lot of larger organizations that they need sales pages on the fly, or they're running different promotional offers and they're doing funnels and stuff like that. That's a great way to pivot that same experience, because if you're doing $2,000 websites for coaches, they're generally a 2 or 3 page site. So it's taking the same framework of what you offer and you do best, but solving a different problem with it.
Love that. So you can kind of have the best of both worlds. You can have the confidence and the competence, and even maybe have the testimonials and the case studies written in such a way that they can apply to where you want to go. Not just where you've been, right? Like, oh, so-and-so turns our sites around in 24 hours, right? It doesn't have to be created the best coaching site on the planet in 24 hours, unless that's where you want to be.
Exactly. And here's the best part with that too, because I think a lot of people get tripped up that they think, okay, well, I'm pivoting, to go to mid-level businesses from the $2,000 coaching offers. So immediately what a lot of people who aren't confident will do is they'll think, okay, well, I need to do a few for free to get testimonials. No, you don't. You charge market rate, and you have some kind of either market rate with a discount for a testimonial in exchange, or offer some kind of a, guarantee.
Yeah.
Right. That you're happy with it and blah, 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 which if you deliver on it, it shouldn't be an issue for you to keep that full rate. But the second you start wanting to do stuff for free, especially when you're going business to business and you're that level, the second you say you want to give them a website for free, they're going to be like, this person ain't serious. They're not even going to entertain you.
Well, and the worst case scenario, again, in that case, is they might really jump on it, and that's going to be a real nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Well, that too, but I think it's highly unlikely.
Right. I totally agree.
That level business.
Totally agree.
They're going to want to go for somebody who knows their stuff and has proven it.
And something else, like a lot of these businesses, right? If they're unhappy, they're just not going to pay you. Right. Which is a whole other conundrum, but it's kind of like, there's no loss to offering that guarantee, because it's going to, like, you're basically just saying up front what's going to happen if for some reason they're really upset with you.
Right.
And especially if you're starting out, you're not going to have the resources to go pursue them in court. And even if you did, it's probably not worth it. So great advice, right? Like, make sure you're charging what you're worth based on the value you deliver, and do other things to assuage the risk for the client. And I think something that I see people doing all the time to in an attempt to lower risk is they'll lower the price. Yeah. And that actually increases the perception of risk. So it's totally counterproductive.
That also brings to, especially depending on what market you're going into, all the, like you had described before with the coaches with the $2,000 pages, that they're really high maintenance and this and that, and they're turn and burn and you don't enjoy working with them. The people who don't value what it is that you're delivering are the ones most likely to not pay a premium for it.
Right. This podcast episode is brought to you by Mimirin, the fun anti-CRM for independent consultants who love serving clients but hate selling. It's got a bunch of stuff you won't see in traditional CRMs, like a positioning wizard, proposal automation all the way through to e-signatures, a whole new take on lead magnets, referral tracking, call mode, and more. And it doesn't have a bunch of the bloat that you get with traditional enterprise tools. If you think a CRM is not for you, or you've tried them in the past and hated them, or you just need to get organized, check it out at mimirin.com. That's MIMIRAN.com, where you can also find a bunch of free resources, including proposal templates, website checklists, and more. Let's get back to it. Okay, so we've got some notions of figure out what we're good at, where can we go find people who are going to value what we're good at, and then have conversations with them. Can we get a little bit more detail about that? Because you mentioned both online and offline.
Right. So it's essentially the same conversation, whether you're having it online or offline, because a connection is a connection, right? So it doesn't matter what your social media handle is. On the other side, you are Ruben, right? So learning how to interact with people as being a human on the other side, as opposed to just another follower or a user, makes all the difference. And you really need to approach it the same way you would meeting somebody in person. But really, it all kind of comes down to, especially for a brand new business owner or somebody, kind of dipping their toes in the water, that articulation that we were talking about in terms of who I am, what I do, who I want connections to, and why they should care. If you're really, really clear on that, and the way I love to describe this to my clients is you need to be crystal clear, not that your grandmother would know who to send to you to refer business, right? Because if you're not niche down enough, they're going to have absolutely no clue.
Yep.
Right. You just say, I'm a business coach. No one's going to refer business to you because they don't know what type of business or what level of business is appropriate for you or what industry you work in or whatever else. You need to be really, really specific. And I also make the case too, it's not just a matter of being able to articulate who it is that you serve, but also who you want to be connected to, who in advance can put you in touch with the people that you could help.
Right. It's like, who's the ideal client profile or ideal prospect profile? And also, who's the ideal partner profile?
Exactly. And
I think that's a great point about, can your grandmother make a referral? And I think the niching down part, I'm convinced we're wired by evolution to avoid this. And people think that if I niche down and my website's too specific, my LinkedIn is too specific, my conversations are too specific about what I do, I'm not going to get referrals. And you're actually going to get more if you can occupy a specific place in someone's mind, so that when they hear about something, they're like, you got to talk to Corrie.
Here's the best way I love to describe this that resonates for a lot of people. So everybody at some point in time has shopped for a car. So let's say you decide, as you're shopping for a car, that you really want a Jeep, right? The second you decide you really want a Jeep, what ends up happening when you're driving on the highway? You see
all the Jeeps
everywhere, right? So being super specific, you're looking to buy a car, you're not going to notice all the cars on the highway, right? But once you make the intention, like, hey, I really want a Jeep, then all of a sudden it makes it that much easier to pick out all the Jeeps on the highway, and they surround you. And you also notice too, it kind of helps with that abundance mindset, that there's so much opportunity that it's easier to pick the opportunities out when they come your way. So that's the benefit to niching down. And it doesn't have to be super, super specific. You don't have to know what specific model of Jeep, right? But just having that general, I guess you could say, intention that that's the direction you want to go, helps make it that much easier, because then even when you're having conversations with people, I'm in the market for a Jeep, and it makes it so much easier for, again, your grandma to say, oh, I saw a for sale sign, 2 rows over on a Jeep down the street. You should call. Here's the number.
Right. When people are going through this process, how many conversations are they going to have, if such a metric is even relevant, before they end up with a client? Because I'm just thinking of this person saying, oh, Corrie, I love all this advice. And, I can imagine some people say, gosh, I talked to 3 people. I don't have any clients. I'm very upset. Or somebody else, I talked to 300 people. Like, approximately how long should this take in terms of number of conversations?
Sure. So I like to use standard kind of sales conversions, which this should be in your wheelhouse, Ruben. So usually I'll recommend you want to be converting about 20% of the quote unquote sales conversations that you have. But in the methodology that I teach, we're doing networking, right? So not every conversation you have with somebody is going to be a direct sales call. Some of it might be networking, trying to see what they're looking for help with, who they want connections to. But the beautiful part is if you play it right, and you end up getting your ideal client on one of those networking calls, when you explain what it is you do and who you're looking for connections to, they're going to raise their hand and say, oh my God, that's me. Where have you been all my life? How do I find out more? And you say, oh, let's book a second call to talk about that. So I usually say 20%, realistically, more would be ideal, but you're generally closing 1 in 4 conversations if you're doing a sales conversation. It could be more than that if you end up having to do more networking to get to the sales calls, but that gives you a good target to start with.
Okay. 1 in 4, 1 in 5-ish. Yeah. Once they're qualified, once they kind of raise their hand and say, I'm interested. Exactly. And that's the key thing. And the more work you do in defining your niche, the easier it is to find those people and the higher your conversion is going to be.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. And
but it's easy to pre-qualify them because you know in advance who you're looking for. Right. And then you position yourself in a way that they raise their hand, which also then leads to that authentic kind of permission marketing as well, where they don't feel like they're being sold to because they're like, oh, I came across you. We met each other online, had nothing to do with what my problem was. Then I found out you solved my problem. Right. And they're asking for your help as opposed to you pitching them.
Right. And I think that's a huge difference, especially for people who are not salespeople. Right. We are not into pitching. Like it just feels awful.
Right.
And I think we all have that mental image of the sales rep who is trying to get their commission check, not trying to help us. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like the Jeep example. We can all pull examples of that sleazy salesperson up in our head. It's much harder to pull up the hundreds of examples of somebody it could just be a waitress, right? Who took really good care of us and was basically a sales rep who helped us have a great dinner. But we didn't feel like we were being sold to.
No, exactly. And I would also add to that too, that, a lot of times when you're a brand new entrepreneur, of course, there's going to be some people that are going to end up kind of pushing you away because they're afraid of that sleazy sale thing, even if you yourself are not sleazy. Mm-hmm. And it's really important to kind of know that that's not a reflection on you. That's a reflection of that person's experience to date. Has nothing to do with you. Still, if you nurture that relationship and you don't push them, and you continue to follow up with them, you'll still build their trust if that they are, a qualified prospect for your offer, that they would still be open to, speaking with you at a later date. They're just going to require more of a warm up than a standard.
And something I've found is if people are in that sort of in-between state or suspicious state, just tell them, hey, I don't think this is for you. Like you're not ready for this.
Yeah, just be upfront.
And that's totally okay. I don't want you to do something that you're not comfortable with, that you're not ready. Like what you're doing today isn't perfect, but it's serving you well. And you've got too much on your plate to take this next leap in this particular area or whatever. And then people either say, gosh, you're right. Let's talk again in 6 months or whatever. Mm-hmm. Or I know it sounds like that, but really it's just because I'm scared. Mm-hmm. And I would really love to fix this problem. Can you help me?
Right. And I think you brought up a really great point there too. Follow up in 6 months. I think a lot, especially brand new business owners, they neglect follow up altogether. And the gold is in the follow-ups. You have no idea how many people I've spoken to over the course of having my business where I'll follow up with them a year later. Mm-hmm. And it's very simple. Like, hey, you still working on launching your business? And they've made zero progress in that time. Yep. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, wow, I really do need help. Thank you for believing in me and following up with me. That then they're ready for the transformation where before they weren't, and they still had to kind of muscle through and see that they needed the support. Right. By having to do it on themselves and not seeing the results that they were looking for. So don't be afraid to follow up.
Or sometimes people just go through a really terrible patch in life and all their big plans that they were really intent on get delayed.
Exactly.
Yeah. All about having a nice CRM that helps you follow up, just FYI. So if we could sort of encapsulate this, I want to make sure, because you've dropped so many nuggets of wisdom. I want to make sure I'm following along. So when you decide you're going to do this, have the financial cushion that you need so that you're not stressed out and trying to close everyone, because people can smell desperation. And you didn't say that, but I'm sort of reading that between the lines.
Lack mindset. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So either keep your job or preferably keep your job and have a cushion, but do something so that you're not hopefully desperate. Figure out what you're great at and who's going to value that. Figure out where those people are and who knows those people, and talk to both of those sets of people, the people who might want to buy your stuff and the people who know a bunch of those other people. And then let's talk a little bit about, I think, what I really wanted to talk to you about at the beginning, which is being your authentic self when you show up for these conversations and you're nervous and you don't want to be salesy, but you know you've got to like make all this happen. How should people approach these conversations so that they can be themselves and not be sleazy, but still be effective?
Sure. So here's the one thing I would definitely kind of preface everything by saying. If you do the work on everything else that you had just listed, Ruben, when you get to the point of having that conversation, you're going to feel confident because you're not offering anything that you don't know deep within yourself that you could deliver upon, right? It's when you don't do the work before that moment that you come off as shaky because you don't believe in yourself, whether or not you could deliver it. So once you do all of that, that definitely helps for sure. And the other way too is to go into any kind of sales conversation, assuming that you're not necessarily the right person to help them, which is one of the reasons that I love networking so much. And I've built so many strategies around that, because when I go into a sales call, I know no matter what, I'm going to help that person, but I might not help them through me. I have a wide network of partners that I refer people to. For example, I don't do product businesses. I have experience in product businesses. I come from a manufacturing family, but I do not like it and I do not teach it and it's not within my wheelhouse. So I work with another coach who does the exact same work as me, but for product businesses. So we swap stuff back and forth all the time. So I know going into that conversation is from a place of service that I want to help that person get whatever result it is that they're looking for, whether or not it's with me, right? So having those conversations from a place, and that's what I really mean by authenticity and really wanting to help and serve people, and have it not necessarily be, adding to your own bottom line.
Basically, you're diagnosing the patient and you may prescribe major surgery. You may prescribe go home and stretch and go to bed earlier and stop eating donuts. And you may prescribe you've actually got to go visit this other doctor down the hallway, depending on what the diagnosis shows up.
Right. And here's the other thing too. So if you end up finding that you got a lot of people coming in that you're diagnosing and send it to the other doctor, that's also a big red flag that you're not qualifying people correctly.
It's like you hung the leg doctor sign out, but you're really the knee doctor. So you're getting all the hip people or something. I don't know if this analogy is, I might be straining this analogy a little bit too much. I think I hurt my hip. Well, Corrie, this has been wonderful. And I think going to be super helpful. And for folks who just listened to the Julie Brown episode on networking, I think this dovetails in nicely. If you didn't listen to that, these episodes go together nicely. Corrie, where can people find you if they want to find out more?
Sure. So you can find me at my website is www.corrielo.com. Lo's a heck of a lot easier to remember than Loguidice, so I don't expect anybody to know how to spell that. Also, you can find me on every social media platform. My handle is @IamCorrieLo.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Corrie. Cheers.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, there's something that resonated with you, would love to hear about it. Drop an iTunes review or a review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you've got a friend who would benefit from this episode, let them know about it. If you've got a friend who wouldn't benefit from this episode, but you just haven't talked to for a while, now's a great time to give them a call. Thanks for listening. Until next time.